digital innovation, skill development, and job growth, etc. Earlier, Mr. Dubey was India head of aerospace and defense at global consultancy KPMG. He has led several assignments related to policy, strategy, bid transactions, and regulatory issues. He has assisted central and state government regulators, airport, airlines, cargo, and MRO companies in India and abroad. Mr. Dubey has worked closely with MOCA in drafting the Vision 2040 National Civil Aviation Policy and the policy framework for the Regional Connectivity Scheme. He had earlier assisted MOCA in drafting the 12th five-year plan for aviation. He was also honored for valuable contribution to Indian aviation in 2012 by the then aviation minister. Welcome, sir. Over to you, Mr. Kalapa.
Thank you, Bindeshwari, and welcome, Mr. Dubey. As you know, we are talking about feasibility studies for introduction of passenger drones in India, and you bring a very unique perspective. You were in the private sector for a long time, and now you have the experience from the other side, government. So invite you to share your opening remarks.
Thank you so much, and also for the kind introduction. I'll keep it shorter than my introduction. I would rather just listen in for the time being and let Smith also come in, a young chap, full of energy. He's done a lot. And all the criticism that the industry associations have done has also played a big role in getting us kicked by our big boss, Uncle M, as we call him lovingly. Okay, so let's hear them out and then I'll come in, because see, as ministry, our role is very, very minimal. Our job is to be a facilitator and a roadblock remover. So if there's any roadblock, like Professor Satya or his good friend Pranjal Mehta or Smith Shah, or hundreds and hundreds of entrepreneurs out there who didn't take up a job and actually have become job creators and taken money from their own fathers and maybe their own savings and putting it into what they love most, okay, which is R&D and developing new tech. Okay, so our job is basically, as a public servant, they are the public, we are the servants. So our job is to just be a facilitator. So I'll stop here. Let Smith, he's also wearing the same jacket as I do. Okay, so let him speak first. Okay, and then probably I can come in as a response to some of the issues or challenges that they may put forth.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Dubey. And I think there is a color difference in the jacket, but other than that, it all looks good, both of you. So, Smith, he threw it in your court. Let's go with the passenger feasibility study. And we need to be mindful of time. I want to have a few questions. What are some of the challenges you face?
Sure. Thanks. So, just wanted to quickly respond to one thing that Professor Satya mentioned, which was about creating corridors for both testing as well as deployment of passenger drones. Now, one thing very important is to note that in the 2018 regulations, we had this limit of 400 feet that any unmanned aircraft system would want to fly. But with the new drone rules, it's actually out. And while you may still need to file a flight plan, but it is generally through policy envisioned that drones are now going to fly at any height. Up to 400 feet in 95% of the airspace, you have no flight permission required, which is the green zone. Now closer to the airports and beyond the 400 feet, it's a yellow zone. Essentially, the government through the policy has also mentioned that you can fly drones. Now, yes, that essentially does not mean that without doing anything extra, Professor Satya, maybe me and you can sit in the e-plane and start flying. There may be a flight plan that need to be filed. There may be certification aspects that need to be looked at, and some operational issues around how to coordinate with the ATC and all. But I think it's a very important step and it's a very important consideration that we understand. There is no primary policy hurdle. It's just an incremental step that probably Amber sir and Kalappa and Professor Satya and all of us can sort of work towards. So it's more of the groundwork and the operational hard work rather than the very sort of conceptual policy change that is required. So that is not the case. The second part that I wanted to talk about is the ecosystem. So very simply put, if we want to test out urban air mobility vehicles and drone taxis, we will have to move out of, at some point or the other, we will have to move out of our IITs and start moving towards an airport. So if Professor Satya wants to do design iterations and sort of start flying his eVTOLs, he needs something like an airport. So just like how we've seen MRO businesses and other aircraft businesses set up shop around the airport, or in some cases even at the airport, probably a passenger drone company will have to very quickly get out of the IIT ecosystem and then start moving towards an airport, which is going to actually help them understand how the entire ecosystem works. When you want to do rapid trials, how can you sort of, without spending some lakhs and crores of moving the equipment, packaging it, and then moving to an airport and then flying there. So all of that is one consideration that needs to be looked at. So how can we enable setup of companies closer to the airport, and how can we give them access to airfield, especially at areas or airfields which are not in the middle of the city, so that the risk of the drones flying and then crashing, probably in a very odd case, is very low and is non-existent. So that's the first thing. Second consideration that we need to look at is how can we bring the simplicity of certifying a drone through a Quality Council of India certification regime, which is very, very simpler than the traditional manned aircraft regime. How can we create a bridge in between? And how can we, even if the aircraft is going to be, let's say, about 600 kgs, I'm told, Professor Satya, that's what your base target is right now. So that's going to go beyond the 500 kg rule of the drones. So how can we create a bridge in certifying such an aircraft quickly? And third, when this aircraft is going to take off, how is that aircraft going to file a flight plan in almost near real time? Flexibly use the airspace and then come back. And definitely, this is not going to be through a planned route. So, like the conventional aircrafts, when you take off from point A and go to point B, the navigation point that you follow or the route that you follow is almost predetermined. So that is not going to be the case for passenger drones. So how can we leverage technologies like UTM that Amit is working on, and flexible use of airspace that is happening in the country? So I think that's the three parts that we feel, at least at DFI, I'm feeling that needs to be unlocked. Bringing the companies closer to the airport, some fast certification for such aircrafts, and lastly, flight planning and use of airspace and coordination with the entire ATC through not the traditional channel, but the very aggressive sort of drone kind of a channel. So that's what my points would be.
Thank you, Smith. Amber, any counterpoints there? Any thoughts on what Smith just shared?
No, I agree with the part about moving out of IIT. I would slightly disagree with getting too close to the airport, because there's a lot between the Valedictory Gate and I think it's called the Adyar, right? The Adyar and the Valedictory Gate and Minambakkam. So there are other places also, and we've had these multiple chats both with DFI and Vicky and with Professor and Pranjal also. That ultimately, what are you lifting? You're lifting, maybe if you're two people, to say 200 kilos along with some little hand baggage or cargo or whatever. So 200 kilos. So let's first start by 50 kgs, 100 kgs, and then 200 kgs, and do it a little away from the city. Of course, definitely out of IIT, but away from the city. And then you gradually come closer to the airport, because the airport will be extremely, we can't afford even one crash, not even one crash. It's very easy saying, experiment this, that. But let's face it, we're talking about human lives here. And where it falls, a 600 kilo, I'm saying even a 6 kilo item falling from 1,000 feet on a what you call Papa Bravo Victor, people, buildings, vehicles. Anything falling on people, buildings, or vehicles, even a 6 kilo item or a 60 kilo item falling from 1,000 feet, create havoc. It can push us back by a decade. So our job is to create that 21st century Pushpak Vimanam. So that Pushpak Viman has to be done in a slightly more calibrated manner. And also, we have this huge civil-military collaboration which is happening very subtly behind the scenes. Okay, and just a couple of days back, one big startup, one of our largest drone startup, has got some huge 200 crore kind of an order. So now these are big numbers. Just I remember 2 years back when I was talking to these young brothers and sisters. Okay, I used to hear a 2 crore, 5 crore, or a 10 crore contract used to be celebrated with the strawberry cake and all that. And now people get 200 crores, 50 crores, 100 crores, and say, yeah, sure. But now we have to go to 1,000 crores. So it's good to see that hunger and all that hard work and all the passion and all the patience, okay, and the perseverance that these young startups and their entrepreneurs did is now bearing fruit. And ultimately, it's like show me the money, honey. So unless the moolah comes in, how do you pay your salaries and how do you pay for R&D? So it's good to see this happening, but we have to do it in a very calibrated manner. And let's not face it. Let's realize what has happened in the last 2 years, and especially in the last 6 months, is that lots of forms, a lot of authorities, a lot of licenses, clearances, approvals, prototype permission, a lot of that bullshit has been cleaned out. Okay, so let's just face it, there are people, who have become redundant, okay, because of that. And there are people who are waiting. I'm sorry to say this, but sometimes you have to get out this politically correct speeches on these webinars and get into real talk. Okay, the real talk is that there are people, if you take away my power, I'll also be very upset. Cursing them for making me redundant. And then what I'll do, I'll think negatively and I'll wait for Smith to fail or a Fiki to fail or a Satya to fail so that I can say, I told you so. Okay, so, and as I mentioned, there's a civil-military collaboration happening. We've had this chat with Professor Satya also. Let's work with them and see in the upper reaches of, say, Leh, Ladakh, or even if there are some temperature issues on the batteries and other system dynamics, okay? So maybe also in the planes, there's a lot of military exercises or a lot of cargo which has to be moved from point A to point B. Military is the first place to go. And if you can prove it with a 15 to 50, as we call it, 50 kilo, 50 kilometers, then 100 into 50, then 100 into 100, then ultimately 200 into 100, a 200 kilo payload going for 100 kilometers. So gradually as we up the weight and distance capacities, okay, I'm sure then we can start looking at putting a human being inside. And once we put, and for this we need hundreds and hundreds of proving flights, okay, for hundreds of hours before we get that confidence to put first a monkey or a dog. Even in a spacecraft, you don't put human beings straight away. So put somebody and then a human being. Okay, we'll put Smith in the first flight. So that God forbid something happens, his bones are the ones who get crushed. Okay, so with all due respect, but okay, then we go to the human part. Okay, and then we come closer to the city, and then we come closer and closer to the airport or the city center, and then maybe 2 years or 3 years down the line, we just start seeing these pushpak vimanans all over the sky. So I think we have to go in a stepwise manner, work with the military first in the upper reaches so that unka kaam bhi ho jaye, and you get paid also, because the R&D has to be funded from something, right? So military is pumping money. Military is pumping money in northeast, upper region, where there's low sparse populations. Wahan se ab shuru karo. Even in the field areas, there are lots of open areas inside India where the army cantonments are. You can do those practices there, and then we get more and more complex as we go forward. So I would urge a very calibrated, safe manner so that never should we take 2 steps forward only to get pushed back by 10 steps and be by these wise gyanis telling us, I told you so.
Thank you, Amber. Yep. One of the things that rang a bell, and as moderator, I shouldn't, but I'll add an editorial comment here, is that Smith, you said about it, automotive and aerospace. Safety is uber critical. And these are 2 industries that have lots of recipes on the testing, the feasibility studies, everything where safety is ingrained into it. Those are things that this industry should borrow from instead of trying to learn as we go. And what Amber talked about, stuff falling on people's head. Maybe there is need for us here to create some test beds, an ecosystem where people can come and test their communication, their vertiports, their drones, multiple drones flying, collision avoidance. All of those things can be tested. We take 100, 200 acres land somewhere outside Chennai, Bangalore, wherever. Of course, that's where we'll take Amber's help and set up an ecosystem, call everybody to put their vertiport, put their charging, put their batteries, fly them around, and iron out all the kinks. I was in engine test for many years, and we have dedicated facilities for doing all kinds of tests. I was at General Motors, where we would have just driving ranges and places where we would test. So I think those are lessons that safety is uber critical. I do want to go to one question, which is a more question from the other end of the spectrum, the user. So when can I actually walk into a shop? Sorry, Amber. Yeah.
Just sorry for the interruption, but this goes in connection with what Smith and Satya said earlier in your earlier question also. See, even for this people mobility, the military is the first place to go because, in the upper reaches or even in some border areas, there could also, you might suddenly need to rush some ammunition, suddenly rush maybe a sniper, maybe a couple of commandos, okay, for quick reaction, okay, or even a doctor. Suppose, God forbid, somebody just has hypothermia or whatever. I mean, some dizziness, some issue at a border outpost in the upper reaches, and suddenly you have to rush a doctor. I mean, the traditional way of going through a mule and then he might take hours or maybe even sometimes days to reach an outpost where a sudden, maybe a bullet injury has happened and it's so difficult to bring, or even for that injured soldier to be brought to the base. You know, these are the use cases which need to work. I mean, there is a live requirement, there's money there, there's a requirement there. Okay, and we don't need to wait for those approvals and permissions and the provings and the type certification. All that will happen later. But at least at the test level, we have a ready-made customer here, okay? And there's money to be paid. So that's one. And before we go on a lighter note, Kalappa ne Bahubali ko kyun mara? Please, at the end of the day, you should answer that.
I wish I had like 10 rupees for each time I heard that question. I could have retired. Thank you. I will go to Satya with this question and then we'll pass it on. I know we are a little out of time, but the question is along the lines of, when can people like us, people like Reggie or me, walk into a showroom and say, I have a license to fly a drone. Can I buy one and now take it from here? When do you think we'll get there? India will get there? Are you on mute? Satya, you're on mute, I think.
Yeah. So the optimistic timeline we have in mind is about 2025, 2026 for that to happen. But 2025, so we are a little bit, let's put it this way. I think other than trying to sell this to a few people, like instead of walking to showroom, but maybe pick people to sell this to and so on, we really want to actually make this more accessible to everybody and want to have trained pilots handle this. So this should actually be more of like a service that's available for a lot of people. So a shared mobility model is something that is what I would be more comfortable with, because we have like trained pilots to do. Because just because you show a license doesn't mean that you're actually going to be a responsible pilot. Probably not, right? So human error is something that always causes a lot of crashes. So one crash can actually sort of mar the whole thing. So we want to be very careful about how this is going to play into the market. So the showroom walking probably will happen a little later, after you see these things take to the skies, probably by 2025. And that's the reason why I actually pushed it to 2026. So it's going to take a little later.
Okay,
That's my
Smith. Thank you. So 2026 is when we can look forward to some drones flying in the sky.
No. You can get them. You can get to see them ahead, like 2024, 2025. But the showroom walking is actually going to take a little longer.
Okay. All right. There's a question for you again, Satya, but we'll come back to that. And I like this discussion. Bindeshwari ji, please stop us, and when we are ready to go off, and we will go off and give yield to the other panel. General question: why no faith in autonomy? I don't know why that question has come up. I think autonomy has been brought up, but let's hear it. Let's go to DFI first. Why no faith in autonomy, or do we have faith? We just haven't discussed it here.
No, I think we have faith in autonomy. It's just that it requires a bit more experience. So I think that is what is missing right now. Till quite some time we were not talking about drones so actively. We were not flying so many drones in the country and all of that. That has happened very recently. So obviously, too much talk and autonomy all happening at the same time cannot be the case. But all of these developments that have happened in the last 6 months and the crores and crores of orders that our companies are getting now is actually helping them learn and create reliable systems. So once you bring in reliability and repeatability in your systems, and you have the power of autonomy, that is going to move towards fully autonomous systems and various levels of autonomy. So I don't think there is any lack of faith in autonomy. It's just that we have lack of experience or lack of deployments. I would not even call it experience. Number of deployments and the data collected from that and the experience does not exist, which is why we are going a little slow on that path. That's what my personal opinion is.
I think Amber mentioned the graded approach of moving from point one to the other, and I think autonomy would be somewhere a little down the line in that graded approach. Do you concur on that, Amber?
No, absolutely. See, I don't know. Was this a journalist who asked? Many of my journalist friends ask these, what do you call sensational question. Why no faith in?
No, it's actually Ajit Mate who's in the next panel. So he has no filters. He asks direct questions. So
Mate bhai, so see, if we didn't have faith, would we even? I mean, I think we are all busy people except for Smiksha. But would we take time out and come out if we don't have trust? See, it's like my daughter when she was born. She first crawled, then she walks, then she'll run one day, then one day, inshallah, she'll fly. Okay, so it's called crawl, walk, crawl, walk, run, fly. Okay, so we have to go in a graded manner. Even with my son, I mean, we wait till 18 till he can drive, 21 till he gets his first sip of beer. I'm sure he'll have it much before that, but fetal drinking age 21, voting age 18. So see, everything has, I mean, it's based on the wisdom of our ancestors or our forefathers. We can always question that and move it up or down a little. But in everything in life, there has a maturity scale. And you crawl, walk, run, and then fly. It's the same thing here. So, as I said, we are fully on. And from what the regulations were, they were also made by very wise people, given the context at that time. Okay, the terrorism and the Saudi Aramco strike and the Iran thing, the Afghanistan issues, airport shutdowns in Gatwick and Istanbul, and Madrid and so on. So it was based on the security environment at that time. Then this Nagorno-Karabakh war, etc., etc., etc. So see, rules are made in the context of the society we are living, right? And then they're made liberal, then they're made further liberal, etc., etc., etc. So right now it's a bull run period. Okay, things have been simplified till first time a misuse happens. A misuse anyway will happen, but we'll have to see whether it was because of the rules or despite the rules. Okay, and then if some big failures happen, God forbid, if some loss of life or property happens, then again as we mentioned in the earlier part of the discussion, there could be a setback. So that's why crawl, walk, run. Everybody believes in autonomy. That's the future. We tell people. Then in less than 10 years, there'll be nothing. All the Boeings and your good friends from across the Atlantic, the Frenchies, the Airbuses, they'll all have no pilots. There'll be no pilot. There'll be extra some 4-5 seats where there used to be. We'll say back in our days in 2021, we used to have a pilot and a cockpit and a loo and a toilet and some galley next to it. They'll only be full of seats right up to and people will fight for that front row seats where you'll actually see the outside with the glass cockpit and all that. So there'll be passengers sitting in where the pilot and the first officer sit. So that's going to happen in less than 10 years probably. In fact, Boeing and Airbus should tell us when that's going to happen. As Babu, what can I tell you? Yeah? Our job is to help and facilitate and promote and encourage and remove some old bad laws or something if there are any, and come up with new laws and come up with the PLI scheme. So we are working on the PLI scheme. Very soon we'll be launching the eligibility forms. Okay, so we're just designing that and we're taking feedback from the industry also before we release that form. So all that is our job. It's the industry which will do the R&D and the academia which will do the R&D like Satya, and they'll work with the Pranjals and the Smithshas to make it take it to the market. And there's military and civil authorities which are waiting for such a thing. And let's start, as I said, just like in the people used to ask us the same way, pizza delivery. As a pizza delivery, I mean, give me Tahir Sadam, I'll live on it for 100 years. But do I really need pizza to survive? As if like that was the bread and butter question. And that's how somebody coined that. Being exploited by using this the UAV, the drone ecosystem, and it's changing lives there. It's already happening. Himachal, I don't know, several projects. Hill states, the northeast, and with the military, we have a ready users. First, make it work there, and then automatically come to this. So whatever we did with unmanned, without human beings, more of a cargo as a payload. Very soon we'll go to the human payload, and we learn from the way we move from no flying to now a lot of flying, and then inshallah one day urban flying. Kalappa?
Satya, I think Amber likes you. He's made fun of me. He's made fun of Smith. He has not yet made fun of you. So
I was wondering about that. maybe the Tahir Sadam was alluding to me.
Okay, all right.
Right.
I can talk about, so mentioned about, sorry,
Good morning,
Mr. Miller.
Yeah, good morning. My sincere apologies for coming late in this session. We are running 4 sessions parallelly. I had to start 2 other. So, and here you are all able people. It was in the hands of able team. So I took the liberty of coming little late to welcome Mr. Amber Dube. It indeed was great pleasure listening to you, sir. And your colleague, Mr. Sanjay Kumar, is our old Joint Secretary in Director and Joint Secretary in Ministry of Power. So currently he is with you in the Aviation Ministry as Chairman of Airport Authority of India. So he was supposed to join. He said he has another meeting, and he said our Joint Secretary is anyway coming. He'll be there. So and he said he will join back at least for 5 minutes before 1 o'clock if he gets free from the Secretary meeting. So people ask what is our as India's Smart Grid Forum? What is our interest in the flying machines? So the interest is that how to charge it, because these are all going to fly with electricity. So in the traditional electric grid, which we ran for over 100 years, we never bothered about all these things because we knew where the electricity going to come. It was coming from big power plants, and we also knew where we had to supply it, in the buildings, in factories, in offices. So the locations were also, there were not much of surprises. But in the last 10-15 years, everything has changed. My electricity comes from solar, wind, and intermittent resources, which I don't know how much I can generate tomorrow. Although I have huge installed capacity of thousands of megawatts of solar panels, but I don't know how much tomorrow it will generate. Same with the wind. And at the same time, my fixed buildings where I had to give electricity, that has changed. Today with electric vehicle that can get connected from anywhere, either from your office or from your home or from a shopping mall or public charging station. So my load and its location has changed. And in 2019, we heard that several licenses were issued in Europe as well as in USA for trial, in many other places, New Zealand, Australia, and all that, for UAM trials. And Uber had announced an Uber Elevate service to start. It's only Ihan started a passenger drone service in China in 2019, but we knew that this is going to come 2 years down the line, 5 years down the line. There will be either delivery, passenger, or drones. And how are we going to charge that? Is the grid ready for that? And like an electric car in your house, you plug in and wait for 4 hours to charge. A flying object cannot be plugged on for hours and hours. The purpose is defeated. So when we looked at it, we knew that, okay, the battery technology, it is improving constantly, but the grid also should be supported. All your vertiports which you are planning should have proper electricity connections so that it can be quick charging can happen. So planning of the grid to take care of this electric mobility, some work is happening already on the electric mobility side. Parallelly, we should look at futuristic requirement of the flying objects also. That's how we initiated this discussion last year. And I'm happy to see that there are a lot of interest in the industry, in policymakers, everybody. The initial set of use cases we thought was that from Delhi to Bangalore, I go in less than 3 hours. From Bangalore airport to Electronic City takes me 3 hours. to Ajit's office, Kalampa's office takes me more than 2 hours by road. So there are many people who, there's a compelling use case, and there's a lot of people with paying capacity who can pay a passenger drone service from Bangalore airport to, say, Electronic City or to other corners of the city. Same with Bombay airport to Nariman Point or to New Bombay. It takes hours and hours. So we thought we'll do a feasibility study. Bangalore was dissuaded by everybody, saying that there are a lot of military areas in between. Getting permission will be almost impossible. So said, do it in Bombay. But now, Mr. Dube, you have given an entirely new angle to it, that look at military. There's a ready market available. There's a compelling use cases there, and money is not a problem. So we will immediately take up this matter with defense and see that where we could do some, even starting with the medicine delivery or some of those use cases. And they understand technology, and they are very good people. We have worked with them on microgrid and many other areas with the defense forces, and we will take up this matter and come back to you. And thank you very much. And your
Just one tiny point. I'm sorry to interrupt, but just two very tiny points. One is, we can just, we don't have to do use a very high cost consultant. Just look at where the helicopters are. See, offshore. Offshore is another big area. Ready-made market. If you can go to Pawan Hans or say even Global Vectra and start selling them, they'll be very happy to explore that. Even on the end user side, ONGC or these offshore platforms, they'll be very happy to consider. First, they'll start with cargo, then they can some cargo supplies, spares, parts, food, and whatever incidentals, and then they'll move to maybe personal mobility. So that's readily available. Okay, search and rescue, they'll be very happy. Okay, these are the low risk use cases where already helicopters are working. So that is one. And next is a challenge to Professor Satya and his community is that start looking at mid-air refueling, as we call it. So I know it sounds far-fetched, but even mid-air refueling was far-fetched if you thought about it 40, 50 years back.
It's not far-fetched. It's not far-fetched number. I think there is a lot of development on that actually.
Yeah. So high surge, you can't, fuel for 1 hour because you've taken 1 hour of endurance, but something which in 10 minutes, very high surge charging without any risk, if that can happen.
All of that is actually being researched upon. We are doing all of that. Yeah.
And now can we go back to the original question?
Back to you. Sorry for the interruption. Back to you.
I think we were talking about.
You're welcome. Ambar meri jaan ke viche pad gaya, pata nahi kyun, but yeah, I think there is, and this is to Smith and to Satya more than to Ambar or Reggie, and those people in this community. There is probably need to have some sort of maybe there exists with you, but all of this community to come together and create a roadmap, or at least if you have things, share it, to inform everybody where they are, the vertiport developers, the battery chargers, that this is the progression, like Amber said, crawl, walk, run. For each of these technologies, this is our crawl, walk, run approach. So that they are informed. Somebody doesn't try to jump up and run and then fail and bring the whole industry back. Again, we do want to encourage some outliers who lean forward and take those risks, but some broad roadmap of how we are going to do feasibility studies, in what order, how we are going to progress here. 2026, according to me, is a very aggressive target, but I have had been on another panel with Satya and he was very aggressive towards me. So, yeah, so that's one thing that this community here, I can see Mr. Ganju is waiting to get in here, I think, to start his discussion.
Again, sorry for a short intervention. See, his first name is Satya, so he can't say Asatya. And secondly, Chakravarti, like the king of the king. So you never mess with, and you as Kalappa, you killed Bahubali, but you still have to pay respect to Chakravartis of the world. I'm telling you, he's surprised before 20. And I'm not a politician, so I'm not here to remove poverty and bring all communities together. So I'm telling you, I have a feeling our first human flight will happen before 2026, maybe 2025.
No, I said that he wanted to walk into a showroom and buy a plane. That I said will take 2026. That's what I said.
Even a helicopter. Helicopters are maybe some 60, 80, 100 years old. Even you can't just walk into and say, I want this pink wala helicopter, mera wala pink or mera wala blue helicopters. There are restrictions, and definitely this is outside drone rules anyways. Okay, so up to 500 kilos, I'm sure, yes, that can be covered. Okay, but that's a number. Okay, we went from 300 to 500 after a lot of fights and debates and very, very aggressive fights and verbal, and we were literally almost like fisticuffs and all that. So that went to 500. The 500 can also go to 1,000, but for that, we have to first prove that it's a very safe thing, because otherwise it'll look like we're just trying to mess around with aircraft rules and aircraft act just to create a drone rules as a competition to it. So anything above 300 actually falls into the helicopter zone. So now we've done it to 500. If we prove it's safe, that 500 can always go to 750, 800, or maybe even 1,000 one day.
Kalappa, can I just have 10 seconds on the autonomy question? Because
yes, please. Absolutely. You're the man. Yeah.
Yeah. I just wanted to put a positive spin to what Smith and Amber actually said on that. So I have two convictions about autonomy. Number one, it will actually happen in flight more than in ground vehicles, sooner than in ground vehicles, because the obstacle course that you're actually seeing in the sky is far less when compared to, except that you need to have different kinds of models, like attention models and stuff that we need to be looking at, right? Because you have no obstacles there, and suddenly if some obstacle comes, how are you going to do, right? So the way you're actually going to do this will be different, but it'll be a lot easier and reliable and safer. That is number one. So don't look at the ground vehicles, driverless cars, but we will piggyback right on that and actually overtake them soon. That's the point. The second thing actually is a conviction that I have. India will probably introduce autonomous passenger aircraft ahead of the West, because the West is actually so much more safety conscious, right? Whereas we are kind of like the emerging kid on the block, And I think this decade, we are actually taking lots of, leapfrogging steps, right? So I'm actually a lot more optimistic that we will do it ahead of everybody else.
Hey, I have to now come in here and say spoken like a professor. Ask us. We are in the industry where one incident can ruin lives and careers. So
I agree with you. I think Indian mindset is different. That's what I think.
This whole discussion
road,
is going
yes.
very interestingly. I would like
But
to
we
now
have to scale back. Go ahead.
Becomes the party pooper.
I don't want to be, but unfortunately, I have to do this job. Okay, so I would like to now request all these speakers to kindly switch on their video so that we can have a quick photo up before we move to the next session. And I'll request the Joint Secretary Sir to stay back with us for the next session for some time as well.
Into taxpayers' money.
Yeah. So tech team, kindly take a quick group photo. I request all the speakers to smile.
Easy, huh?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. And
Mr. Kalapa.
over to you, Bindeshwari.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Kalapa, for moderating the session so well. And now I'm moving to our next session.
Bye.
So we have talked about the roadmap. Now it's time to understand the technical feasibility and infrastructure requirement for the UAM system. For this session, we have with us our moderator, Mr. Amit Ganju, the founder and chief executive officer under Technologies. We have a line of panelists, Mr. Yogesh R. Iyer, the founder and chief executive officer, Vinata Aeromobility, Mr. Ajit Mate, lead system engineer, air traffic management, Boeing India Limited, Mr. Rajkumar Sharma, president, All India Council for Robotics and Automation, Mr. O.D. Naidu, the global R&D, APTS PLU Hitachi Energy, and Mr. Saeed Mohseni, founder and CEO of Samer Aerospace. I'll just give a quick brief intro of all the speakers. Mr. Amit Ganju is a serial entrepreneur and currently the founder and CEO of Andhra Technologies, an award-winning drone operations and US traffic management UTM platform provider based in Washington, D.C., whose platform Smart Skies is used by multiple commercial and government entities for running and managing commercial drone operations. Amit has over 20 years of aviation, telecom, and wireless experience in both the federal and the commercial space. He's an engineer, a licensed pilot, following a lifelong passion in aviation and builds experimental aircrafts. Welcome, Mr. Ganju.
Thank you, Vindeshwari. It's a pleasure being here.
Our next speaker is Mr. Yogesh R. Nair. He's founder and chief executive officer, Vinata Aeromobility. Always loved cars and airplanes more than anything. With an ethos of know you, follow it, dream it, love it, and more than 15 years in product design, development, and manufacturing, he's living out his passion through Vinata Air Mobility. Ever since a young boy, Yogesh, founder of Vinata, loved cars and flights more than anything. Welcome, Mr. Yogesh. Mr. Rajkumar Sharma is the president of All India Council for Robotics since April 2014. He is passionately committed to transform India to be a global leader in the field of robotics, IoT, and AI through technological advancements, building an ecosystem that enables institutions to produce best talent as well as creating workplace for them, helping industry to develop best products and creating marketplace to showcase, establishing India as a hub for innovation, products, and technology startups. Welcome, Mr. Sharma. Mr. Ajit is the lead system engineer, air traffic management with the Boeing Research Technologies team in Bengaluru, India. Currently engaged as the BR&T India subject matter experts for ATM navigation, communication and surveillance system on a national airspace system level, CNS ATM modernization roadmap project for the airport authorities of India. over 30 years of experience in areas of aviation, air navigation, air defense, including flying experience as a military navigator with the Indian Air Force. Retired wing commander from the Air Force after 21 years of service, employed as flying navigator, missile operation officer, missile unit and battery commander, surface air guided weapon instructor. Welcome, Mr. Ajit. Mr. Odi Naidu is a passionate and result-driven power system researcher with 15 plus years of technology development, fundamental and applied research, project management, product design, development and maintenance experience at ABB, GE, APCPDCL Limited, electricity distribution and transmission utility. His experience includes power system research in protection and automation, fault location, digital technologies, artificial intelligence and machine learning applied to power system protection and diagnostic analytics, power system analysis, and in developing, implementing, and maintaining SCADA, energy management systems, and distribution management systems. Welcome, Mr. Naidu. Dr. Syed Mohseni is the serial entrepreneur who has founded a number of successful businesses with his academic background in aerospace engineering design. He holds an MSc in aerospace propulsion, Cranfield University, as well as an MBA and doctorate in gas turbine technology, Cranfield University. Samer El Sayary Limited is a UK-based company developing a range of vertical takeoff and landing VTOL electric-powered business aircraft for civil aviation use. Welcome, Dr. Syed. Over to you, Mr. Ganju, to moderate the session and make us understand the requirements for the urban air mobility system development, technical and infrastructure developments. Yeah.
Thank you, Bindeshwari. It's an honor to be here, and I'm glad to have such panelists on with us today. And it's good to see. Hopefully, Mr. Amber is going to stay with us, and I'm glad he's here for this panel too. Because after his performance in the last panel, I don't know what we would do with this panel. And I was joking at an event the other day. There's a plan A and a plan B for everyone in life. The plan A is what you do on a day-to-day basis. And if that doesn't work out, you have a plan B. And I told them, my plan B is stand-up comedy if this thing doesn't work. But I don't think that's for me. It's like for Mr. Dubey, it's right on the mark. So thank you all for taking the time. And I'm humbled to be here moderating the session. And there was awesome discussion that happened earlier. And what we will try and talk, I'll try to facilitate a candid conversation. And my goal here is to moderate and not necessarily answer a lot of things. I know even though Ajit sent some questions he wants me to answer, I'll try to plug them in somewhere there. But UAM is a buzzword. And drone is a fancy thing. And I think Dr. Satya said it rightfully so. It's like a battery with a bunch of propellers and everyone gets excited about it. But at the end of the day, it's just a means to an end. It's what the end mission that it solves that's more important. And how do you do it safely? And there are similarities between small US world and the big US world, but there are a lot more dissimilarities as well, and similarities with the traditional crewed aviation space. So how close are we really to Jetsons becoming a reality, which is like was the popular 70s show which showed these guys flying in the car or from rooftop to rooftop. What are the big questions that need to be solved? What options do we have today? Mr. Amber talked about the crawl, walk, run, and I'm a firm believer in that. I always say that. I actually like to use words in addition to that: innovation, experimentation, and operationalization. Like if we were to peel the layer and see what that actually means. Right, so I'd love for you guys to be. I know that's not a problem for Mr. Amber. He's honest and he just says what's on his mind. But for others, let's honestly discuss what are the expectations of the market. What are the steps needed from an infrastructure and a regulatory point of view to make that happen? Whether it's passenger drones or cargo carrying drones into the national airspace system in India. How do we get there? And we have amazing speakers. We have OEMs on this panel. We have air traffic folks on this panel. We have energy folks on the panel. So with that, what I would ask is I would like to go around and give everyone like maybe 2 to 3 minutes. We want to leave some time for discussions. And Bindeshwari, please stop us if we go over time. So if you could take 2 to 3 minutes, no slides, just share your views on the topic. So we'll go based on the way the names are listed on my screen. So we'll say, Mr. Yogesh, if you could go first and just take 2 to 3 minutes to just kind of share your views on the topic.
Yes. So hi all, thank you, Amit Ganju. Yes. So coming to India, see, one thing is we need to understand India is such a populated country. It's not like something like a West where we have, able to fly very frequently, even the choppers and everywhere. So here the infrastructure plays a huge role when it comes to the, urban air mobility space, especially. So when we are talking about infrastructure, so vertiports construction and multiport build, which is play a huge role here. So a country city like Chennai, Mumbai, and Bangalore or Delhi, a crowded place, where we need to have not like a standard vertiports. We should have plan of various. Built in different categories like micro vertiports, standard vertiports, and in a large vertiports. And if you talk about the safety features, the very important thing is safety aspects. We need to put the people first, right? So when it comes to a technical build, what if I am flying in a country like India, something happened. Recently, we heard a news about, last couple of few days back, Joby was get into accident while, making a flight testing. This was the big news, happened. After that, every urban air mobility, manufacturers are, have, a little bit of, for congesting. So now, as rightly our Joint Secretary Amber Dubey was mentioned, we don't want to be, make sure there will be a single accident. Though if it is carrying a load, and there is, as Amit Gunju rightly said, there is a lot of difference between a normal drone and there is urban air mobility which carrying up people or cargo. So because we are lifting a passenger, right, when it comes to urban air mobility. And though if it is a cargo also, if you look, it's gonna be a high load capacity, minimum of 250 plus of kilograms which we are carrying from point A to point B. So the safety features we need to be work on more as a manufacturer point of view. And coming to the testing zone, we should also have in India, before getting to a commercialization or before going to a product certification, we should have a proper maybe outside not close to airport, outside city somewhere, we should have a proper testing zone has to be formed, so maybe in a different part of a country we should have, so that many players like us will emerge fast, and we can have a lot of product in this eVTOL space, especially.
Awesome.
Yeah, I hope
no, thank you, Mr. Yogesh. That's very thoughtful. I appreciate you taking the time. And if I can ask Ajit to go next, and if everyone could try to stay within 2 to 3 minutes, so we have some good discussion at the end, that would be awesome.
Yeah, thank you, Amit, and also thank you, Reggie sir. I actually the trigger behind the whole idea of we started to think about urban air mobility was a presentation that Reggie sir and Bindeshwari gave at the Advanced Air Mobility Day celebration of NASA. And the Boeing team members in US happened to be listening in. So they got in touch with me and they asked me to connect with Reggie sir. I requested Reggie sir for a meeting, and the shining lights in his eyes and the way he excitedly talks about adopting new technology at his age, I was floored. I was literally floored, and I have been pestering him after that again and again. Thanks a lot again, Reggie sir, for giving me this opportunity today. Okay,
thank you very much for the kind words.
When it comes to technical feasibility, I think I come from a normal flying background, navigator by training, and I understand that the communication, navigation, surveillance systems, as well as the air traffic management systems which are used in manned aircraft are almost useless when you start flying the unmanned aircraft. So in the UTM field, new technologies are being developed. There is no standardization anywhere in the world at present. Different technologies are being developed in different parts of the world. What is essential is when you start thinking on these lines, we need to start by standardizing or accepting local equipment. What I can see is a underlying data network that will be able to move information in real time between these systems will make the type or make of the systems redundant. So that is one part that has to be covered in technical feasibility. Another part is most important is technology on board the UAS. A large amount of verification and validation required for proving these technologies, availability of supplementary data services, as well as information about weather, obstacles, and especially enablers for joint use. That means how can drones fly with other drones or drones fly with other manned aircraft safely? That is going to be a deciding factor. When it comes to infrastructure, I think all of these transceivers on ground as well as sensors on ground have to be protected. Like Reggie sir mentioned, the vertiports or the vertihubs that will come up to support the UAM system in a city have to be co-located with the other multimodal transport in the city because that is a key result area for the Indian government. Smart cities will have multimodal transport solutions, all of them electrical. So preferably on the same building where the buses and cars are getting charged, on the top maybe the drones can get charged. So that co-location is something that we might think about. Rules of business have to be defined. While defining airspace on infrastructure on ground, you should also remember infrastructure in the air. At least in the beginning, I believe reserved corridors for different use cases on different CONOPs will be essential to be segregated in urban airspaces. And on the operational aspects, I think, like already covered by somebody else, vertiport management, importance of arrival departures, importance of ensuring interoperability between not only between drones, but between the UTM systems or the UAM systems and the existing ATM systems, so that in future we are able to smoothly and safely integrate them together are going to be important. And like Amit touched upon, I think development of regulation is going to be very different. Indian government has woken up and taken the right steps in the correct direction with the US rules and the UTM policy, and the amount of liberalization that is going on is, frankly, my compliments to Amber Dubey, not expected from Indian government. So it is really surprising that so much of liberalization has taken place, but we know that when it comes to flying overhead populations, a whole different set of rules will be required. Like Amber sir again mentioned, we might start somewhere with the military on the border areas, slowly prove the technology, then bring it nearer to the cities, bring it nearer to overpopulation operations, and maybe even connect airports tomorrow, so that you come in a long distance flight, land at the airport, and then take a drone home right from the airport. So it's possible. So I think there are a lot of things that can be done. A lot of infrastructure will be driven by the CONOPs of the drones. But this is going to be a multi-agency and large-scale collaboration effect that will be required. In the future, we have to work together. Back to you, Amit.
Thank you, Ajit. And just to kind of add a thought there, I personally don't like using the word urban air mobility. That's why NASA actually changed the term from urban air mobility to advanced air mobility, because urban gives it the context that you're already going to operate in the cities. There's application of this technology in rural, remote areas, like Mr. Dubey said as well, and other speakers said. So maybe it's time to start using term advanced air mobility, just saying, so that the context gets set correctly. So continuing on, Mr. Rajkumar, you are next on my list. Would love for you to share a few thoughts with us.
Thank you, Amit. First of all, I'll congratulate to Mr. Rezi and team to take the initiative of driving the vision of now not UAM, I would say advanced air mobility in India, and organizing this conference and giving me opportunity to speak in this forum. Friends, when most of the urban cities are densely populated and cross more than 50% of the threshold limit and increasing rapidly rather, and this urban population is badly affected in traffic jam and living in deep polluted environment. I don't have any statistics, but I observe myself. I stay in Delhi, and in a year I spend almost 700 hours in traveling, and I know almost 60% of my time is wasted in traffic jam. Probably this concept can reduce somehow this problem in the near future. I don't know how soon we can see the implementation of this new generation of transport, the way we see in fiction movies, but certainly it would have big impact on our lifestyle as well. So moving forward to the topic, I think first we need to categorize the type of transportation. And in initial phase, the priority can be given to medical, police surveillance, and goods transportation. And then after we can look forward for the passengers taxi. So infrastructure going to be most important factor for elevating future mobility. The technology and physical assets are necessary to enable this skilled adoption of piloted or fully autonomous electric or hybrid electric or like eVTOL aircraft for either people or cargo transportation. So I can divide this UAM concept in 4-5 different key factors. One is obviously developing the aircraft specific to the urban cities, right? So if possible, like not many manufacturers have made progress on the aircraft themselves. So if they can design and develop small size or having lesser wings, foldable wings, or rather no wings, or having better battery backup, or probably hydrogen based aircraft, that would be really better for this concept. And then after ground infrastructure, that will require a comprehensive assessment and design integrated with the condition of a particular city. It depends on city to city. So it's important to consider different landing pads configuration depending on pre-existing availability, space utilization, or functionality requirement and locations as well. So planning of the city is very, very important in this sector. Obviously, everybody talks about we can plan for rooftop small runways, or we can plan some kind of underground runways or vertiports, etc. And one very important factor, in fact, in the last discussion I've just heard. Most of the time, even today, like we spend, whenever we take a local flight, we spend more time on the airport itself. So if we can make some kind of applications, develop that kind of a concept, so that just simply scanning a code, we can easily onboard in the craft. So that is equally important. And air traffic management, like prior to the implementation of UAM system, developers have to ensure that they meet the requirement for safe, robust, and scalable operations. So predictive analysis would be really important. In this case, like real-time weather monitoring will be critical. Providing micro weather information on wind gusts like rain, lightning, snowfall, and other factors to eVTOL aircraft operations. So dynamic and safer route planning can be enabled by predictive capability combined with the monitoring. So like making separate corridors for different type of drones, aircraft for different purposes. So these are the major factor. And since Mr. Dubey is here, I would say like India is already into development of the 100 smart cities. So this should also be involved the part of the planning, because if we miss this now, so obviously in future it will be really tough to make a new kind of a planning and setting up this structure is what.
Thank you. Thank you, Raj. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. Moving on to Mr. Naidu, if you can share a few thoughts with us. We can't hear you. You're muted.
Thank you, Amit, and giving an opportunity to share my thoughts on this great UAM systems. So, though I'm not an expert in the UAM systems, but I can see more use cases in the power system domain. Just I would like to share my thoughts to the sharing my one slide I prepared and different use cases where we can apply, especially in the power system. So, are you able to see my screen?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Yeah, I can finish it up in 2 minutes. I will summarize it. Yes, the previous speakers really talk about the various opportunities using this urban air mobility systems. But I can see, I don't want to go into those details, but I can see good opportunity to conduct some pilots in the transmission line and even the wind park and even solar park maintenances. For example, so in transmission lines are even transmitted to very rugged terrains like hilly areas and even mountains and snow areas where we can need to be clean these insulators. Otherwise, it may lead to the flashovers and it may again create a fault and a lot of interruption in the power. So for that, today we are using some kind of helicopters in the advanced countries, even in India also. But the drones can be, or drones, or even the air taxis can be obliged to reach that point, and even cleaning those insulators. And also, whenever there is a fault, let's say even for the location of the failure tower, because the transmission actually spread out across the 300-400 kilometers. So again, there are systems which can locate the fault, but again, reaching that place to the crew is very, very challenging. So where even the UAM vehicles can be used to reach the failed tower point, and again, they can take the repair quickly. Even today, it will take few weeks to restore the supply, but again, that downtime can be reduced to the even few hours if this system can be integrated with the transmission line maintenance systems. Even especially for the wind and solar, so there are a lot of problems. Like for example, any problem in the wind turbine, especially the offshore wind farms. So to reaching there, again, we need to be navigate the various ships, and again, we need to go there and again go into the turbine top, and again, we need to repair it. But today, the turbine sizes are very small, like 2 to 5 megawatt, but going forward, even now commercially available 15 megawatt turbines, means even the turbine had a helipad or even some kind of platform to land these vehicles. So this is also another use case I can really see, and where we can do the immediately the opportunity for the piloting for this kind of technologies, where it's not involving the public, and also especially for the safety point of view, we can conduct a lot of no concern of really in this area. So it is little away from the public, so that we can conduct the further. I think this is the one area I can see as a power system engineer, where we can apply this technology. And also, I just would like to blast 3 questions for the panel. If they can discuss further later, it's really happy to know from you. So
Yeah,
Anita,
we'll try to capture those as part of the Q&A session, if that's okay. We'll get to those. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Amit, I like to mention that we are already using drones extensively in transmission and also in distribution. Last year, we brought a UK company and did a pilot work in Delhi with a BSES Rajdhani. We did the inspection of about 16 kilometers of 33 kV and 11 kV lines. It's more than the drones, the powerful analytics which help us in analyzing predictive maintenance fault which can happen otherwise with human eye we cannot, which this camera can. So we are doing that already. Just wanted to add that.
No, absolutely. And I know Mr. Dubey can probably give you a lot of examples that MoCA has given approvals to doing power line inspection, all pipeline inspections in India. So we're going to try to see how we go from their small US doing these inspections to bigger, larger scale. With that said, let's now bring a different perspective. So we also have a speaker from United Kingdom, Dr. Moshani from Samer Aerospace. So Said, if I can ask you to maybe share your perspective of what you're seeing happening in other parts of the world, and how that may, based on what you've heard in the past hour or so, how do you feel that might relate to the Indian market, and what changes or adaptations might be needed?
Thank you, Amit, for the opportunity. First of all, it's great to hear your perspective, guys, and it's very important to see a comprehensive set of views from being enthusiastic and also being conservative and being wise in the approach of the development of the industry. One thing is related to the industry, how the industry might grow, and the other one is that how does it grow in different geographical regions. And it's very important to pay attention to this matter, because something that would grow in certain way in the West might not be exactly the same in the East. The example of this is this on the opportunity side. If you remember when the mobile technology came to certain areas in India, it actually overtook the landline connectivities, because there wasn't any need for the landline anymore. So there might be opportunities in here as well to consider. However, it's one thing that majority of the people are not paying attention, and that is, and they we quickly run to say we want to electrify this area, so electrification of the urban or advanced air mobility, and we run towards that before remembering that if we talk about electrification of the automotive industry, the cars were operational for decades and decades. And all we are doing now, we're going one step to electrifying the automotive industry. The advanced air mobility industry almost is non-existent yet. So why do we want to jump to create the industry, but also do the electrification at the same time? There are whole loads of different operational challenges that we need to address for the OEMs to understand what type of vehicle they need to design so that they can meet the operational, regulatory, certification hurdles, and then at the end also meet the requirements of the market at the price that market wants. So one thing is to chunk it down to say, let's think about an operational vehicle that we could get into the field, and we could start doing various forms of tests and use cases that are pretty simple, and then gradually work way up towards more complex ones, and then add the technologies as we are comfortable to add them. So there are plenty of companies out there that they want to develop pure battery and electric vehicles, electric VTOL aircraft, and they simply don't get the right range and the payload that they require to deliver. So in Samer Aerospace, what we focused on to see what is possible to be taken to the market, and then during a roadmap that we have designed, at which point we can add different technologies that can deliver what market wants. So currently what we are doing, whilst we're testing the half-scale prototype of our 5-seater aircraft, which is an 8-meter wingspan, and you can look up the website later on in samadaerospace.com. And whilst we are doing that for the passenger, we are seeing how we can use this large UAV for various other applications, probably in the beginning in flying over uninhabited areas for certain use cases that we know even if the aircraft is lost for whatever reason, there is no danger to the human life. And then gradually work our way towards more complex missions. In here, the autonomy and also the technologies for the communication works with the rest of the systems. So as we are working with yourselves on the BVLOS technology, it's important that we have a good established platforms that we can communicate with the vehicle for having a pilot on the ground, and then gradually see, once we have secured that set of operation, how can we add the autonomy at different stages to it. Thank you.
Thank you. So I appreciate everyone taking the time. And Mr. Dubey, if I could ask you if you would like to add something. Otherwise, I had a specific question for you. Can we start off with that?
Specific is best, because I can be very verbose in my answer otherwise, and specific is best.
Okay. So in the last panel, I'm kind of dovetailing off of the last panel where a comment was made, a controversial comment. India can be different. Like, we are not necessarily as safety conscious as rest of the world is. And me coming from engineering background, and then also I have the aviation thing there, that kind of throws me in a loop. I don't know how to react to that.
I think it was just
your reaction changed when that happened. So we'd love to hear your reaction.
I know Satya very well, and his name is Satya, so he has to speak Satya. So I think it was an off-the-cuff remark. And see, it's about bold measures. Bold measures is what we would take, but that doesn't mean unsafe. So there's a difference between boldness and stupidity, boldness and unsafe. So you can say even a paraglider or a skydiver is also reckless, unsafe, crazy. It's a passion. People do skydiving for a business, for a living every day. And they can't live without skydivers. The skydivers and the paratroopers, they jump every day. So we will take risks, and for long we've been these copy pasters. Okay, so I think this is what, I mean, I can't read, I don't have an extrasensory perception to read Satya's mind, and I would rather let him speak for himself. But now as government, of course, our primary motive is public welfare. So all that we are doing ultimately has to meet the objective of these two keywords, public welfare. So even if you're using drones for either cargo transportation or human transportation, that's for public welfare. Okay. So safety can never, ever be compromised. And I myself mentioned that one tiny accident will push us back by almost 2, 5 or 10 years. And there are lots of naysayers who are in fact waiting. I'm sorry to say this, but there are naysayers who are waiting for that accident to happen. Because many of them have lost their jobs, have become a little unemployed because of the liberalization, and now nobody has to go to them, make them feel important. So they're just sitting there, twiddling their thumbs and maybe having some salted peanuts throughout the day. So they are waiting for some such event to happen to say, I told you so, right? So never, okay, just to summarize, we can never compromise on safety. And that's precisely the reason why I was hinting that our crawl, walk, run, and then fly should be the motto. Okay, so the best way to do it is in the hill areas, sparsely populated hill areas, where you meet a double objective. Our military definitely leads faster mobility there between the ground forces and the main bases to the upper reaches where the checkposts are, where the border outposts are, where our brothers and sisters are keeping an eye on the enemy. They have to be supplied. Injured people have to be brought back. Doctors could be taken there. In the hilly areas for cargo transportation during the harvest season, a lot of wastage happens of fruits, fresh fruits, vegetables. Even the Prime Minister talks about the coastal areas. He wants a huge, heavy capacity cargo drones to be used for fresh fish to be brought to the exporting centers or processing centers, prawns, shrimps, meat products or fish products. Okay, so that the fishermen can get a better price. Those are the things we need to focus on. And we should try and become a Jagat Guru, Vishnu Guru, whatever you call it. For long, we have been these copy pasters, and you develop the capital equipment there, and then you bring it back to India and just churn out assembled goods or manufactured goods here. But who designs the machine that makes the product is what we want to go backward into the design part, the R&D part, the know why rather than know how. I mean, everybody, you teach me how to run a lathe machine, I can run a lathe machine. But to design a lathe machine or a CNC lathe machine of the next generation, okay, with a 5-axis, 6-axis lathe machine, how to design that and make it a world-class product, okay, which churns out equipment, which churns out more equipment, which churns out the product. So we have to go 2 stages back to the Gangotri, the Yamunotri, or the starting point of that product. So that is what our focus is.
Thank you for that.
I don't know how much whether I answered your question or not, but these are just my random thoughts.
You did. And I kind of knew, and I know it was an off-the-cuff remark, but I didn't want people to get that perception. So that's why I think clarification.
So as government and regulators, we can never, ever mess around with life and property. Life and property of every Indian is as valuable as the life and property of a Japanese, French, or an Israeli, or an American, or a Brit. Okay, so never can that compromise happen. My parting shot would be that you should find a way to get Dr. Amit Ganju to renounce his US citizenship and become an Indian, or at least start spending more time, at least 6 months here, 6 months there, because this is a sweet spot. This is where all the action is going to happen.
2 weeks.
So,
I'm going to be in Delhi in 2 weeks.
Welcome home.
I see you every time. I spend more time up in the middle of the night here. But no, it's a passion for me. That's why I do it, because I see the potential. With that said, so I'm actually going to dovetail right off of your question to Ajit. Ajit, based on what you heard about safety and stuff like that, what do you see as the challenges in establishing the safety case for the new forms of flight? Because at the end of the day, you have to ensure that the national airspace system stays safe. And what do you think that needs to be? Like whether it's new airspace design, whether it's corridors, and I know I have my opinions, I can give you my opinion, but I would rather this come from you and other speakers on the call.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Amit, for the question. I think I am well qualified to answer that because I have worked for the last 2 years with the Airport Authority of India on the CNS ATM modernization project in which we made a roadmap of how equipment and infrastructure can be upgraded by them in order to accommodate more manned aircraft. India is having between 700 to 750 aircraft registered in India at present, and we expect a threefold increase in this in the next 20 years. So we are expecting the aircrafts to reach around 2,400 to 2,500. And at the same time, when the number of US activities in the same airspace starts to grow, it is something that Airport Authority and the Ministry of Civil Aviation are extremely concerned about. So that is where the safety comes in. That is where the interoperability of the UTM and UAM systems with the existing ATM system comes in, and maybe future joint operations, because there are going to be at least few areas in and around city airports which will have manned aircraft coming into conflict with unmanned aircraft. So having clear rules of business set down in writing, clear regulations supporting and establishing roles and responsibilities as well as liabilities is extremely essential in this field, for which we need to start working right from now. Like we have drone manufacturers on the call today who say that by 2025, 2026, they'll have drone personal air vehicles, PAVs, ready to fly in the Indian skies. We need to have the regulatory support and the safety of these vehicles ensured. At the same time, we need to ensure that they do not come in conflict with the existing manned transport, which is going to increase. So we are intending to work in this field. There are multiple proposals that we have taken to the Airport Authority as well as Ministry of Civil Aviation, and we hope we'll be able to work with all stakeholders. That is going to be the most important thing. If you go back to the national campaigns that are being planned and worked on by NASA and FAA for the last few years, you will see the amount of due diligence that has to go into it, and the amount of participation by all stakeholders that is going to be critical. We need to get all the people together, sit across a table, and talk about how they are going to develop together so as to enable not only an urban air mobility, but like you mentioned, an advanced air mobility system in another, say, 10 years in all parts of India.
No, thank you, Ajit, and I can attest to that because having been involved in all the NASA campaigns since day one back in 2015, so I can give you first-hand feedback on that. While we'll peel a few more layers when it comes to what you call airspace management and what it means from that, but I would like to switch over to the OEM aspect here for a second, and I'll talk to this question is for both Yogesh and Syed, and I'll let each one go one at a time. And if you can add, a big part of this vision is built on young, like venture-funded, like self-funded, bootstrapped, or venture-funded company. Because to design an aircraft, it's typically traditionally been done by players such as Boeing, Airbus, who pour in billions and millions of dollars. Now we have startups like ePlane, and we have Samad here, Yogesh. So what I would like to see, what are the challenges specific? Because you have to bring a complex aircraft to market within an ambitious time frame. What are the challenges specific to these companies, and how are they balancing the short-term customer development needs against the long-term integration and certification activities? I know that's a mouthful. That's so. I would like to just share you guys to share your thoughts. And if both of you could go, I don't know, Yogesh, if you want to go first, and then Syed. Did we lose Yogesh?
Yes. Yeah. So thank you, Amit. See, in India, you see, this startup culture is growing rapidly, and very importantly, this, especially when we talk about this advanced air mobility or UAM industry was emerging, from later 2010 onwards, we are just following about the technology. When we are talking about this eVTOL and this flying car, there is another name was rapidly across developing globally, that is called a flying car. And in this advanced air mobility space, it's a dream for everyone, right? So there is, if you see every technology industry, there is transition is happening. What is next? When it comes to a mobility, now we are having a three mode of transportation currently, by road or aerospace, and and as well as by rail. And what is next mode of quickest transportation? There was one slide before was displaying over here, and which is how we are going to another mode of transition compared to hyperloop, right? So here for urban air mobility or advanced air mobility, we need to the infrastructure plays very limited role, especially when it's transporting in a hill station or in even in a last meeting also Amber Dubey was rightly mentioned, like in a seashore we want to travel either in a cargo mode or transportation passenger on and off pick up and drop. And coming to the challenges of in Indian startup thing, funding plays a major role. Though we don't have here any startup ecosystem, infrastructure support for a vertiport, and that we are facing a huge problem. Even in fact, people, when we are talking about to approach various VCs across country, people are cautious about the industry when it's going to emerge, right? So though we are too early adoption on the technology and we are working on the scale down prototypes and we are moving to a full scale prototype now, based on our own self bootstrap funding, we expect government to look about on the future grants, to support OEMs, startup like us. If you look companies outside in India, especially in Asian countries, people are getting a lot of supports from the government side also. So we really expect we will also, for a future technology like us, will get good support. Then the industry like us, there is many startup will emerge fast.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Syed, before you go on, I had one more follow-up question on that, because this was a question pointed towards the government, and we have Mr. Dubey here. If I can tag him again. Mr. Dubey, I'll rephrase the question for you. The question was from Yogesh, kind of mentioned, as startups in India, venture capital in this space isn't pouring in. It's starting, but especially in the AAM, bigger aircraft, it's not. So in other parts of the world, I can tell you, like many cases, the government runs grant programs. Like in UK, there's Future of Flight Initiative. There's similarly NASA-funded programs or Cesar funding projects. How do startups in India, that innovation, because like you mentioned, we need to go back to the drawing board. We need to innovate instead of being copycats here, right? So how do we sustain this industry? How do we incentivize them? Are there any plans like from the government side down the line? And I don't know what you can or cannot say, so I'm just putting you on the spot, and I apologize. If you can't answer, it's perfectly fine. Is there any hope for companies that have these immensely great ideas to incubate and bring something to market?
That's a good question, and I'll definitely answer. I'll be very blunt and honest. R&D has not been a forte, okay, even from a public finance perspective, okay, because of the sheer, difficulty in analyzing which are the 10 applicants with those wacky ideas and great ideas. So we don't have like a DARPA here, okay. So of course, IDEX, and there's so many. I won't speak about the Defense Ministry and Department of Science and Technology and NITI Aayog. They're running their own support programs, and many of our drone companies have got, and many of the IITs and IISc and a couple of other good institutions have got funding through that. But for an entrepreneur, a youngster who's barely out of college, okay, kind of a young kid. Now, he doesn't have a track record. And for such people, babus like us, our hands shake even if I give 10 rupees. Okay, because how do you prove that this is not a nexus? It's not a Ponzi scheme that I've tied up with some young startup guy who made them fancy presentation. We set up this committee, and the committee gave him $1 million or 10 million or $100 million. That is the classic question. So we are more comfortable with production-linked incentive. Once you produce and you sell, and not just produce, you can't produce and put it in your warehouse. So you produce and you sell. So once you sell it, okay, it's backed by a GST invoice, which means we have already collected 18% on it. Then we give you a cash back. So you understand? So this, let's start with this, because we started with that Disha fund 2 years back. We spoke about that. Disha stands for, of course, it means a direction, but Disha stands for Drones for Infra, Security, Healthcare, and Agri. These are the 4 big use cases we thought. So Disha fund, we were thinking 1,000 crores, then brought down to 500 crores, and COVID hit us. Money was short. So we've gone through maybe it'll get revived. There, the idea was based on idea-based funding. You come up with an idea, we create a group of wise people. Of course, nobody from the government will be part of such a committee. To someone like an Amit Ganju or someone like a Satya or someone like a banker or a VC completely outside the government, they'll have a 3-member committee. And those guys will do that Shark Tank kind of evaluation. And once they say, this sounds like a good idea to put money in, and we put 2 crores, 5 crores, 10 crores, depending on what. So that was the original idea. We may go back to that, but at this moment, it's not on the anvil. Right now, we are just working very, very hard to get this PLI scheme, because now it's a notified scheme. So that money is already allocated for the startups. So anybody who can sell drones beyond 2 crores, 2 crores is a very small number. Anybody who sells more than 2 crores, once you've sold it, you show the GST invoice, get us. In fact, we don't even want to see your invoice. You just get us. We are making those formats and stuff.
Right.
So just based on a statutory auditor's certificate, maybe in a one-off case, we might do some little forensic analysis. But in most cases, just based on the statutory auditor's declaration, a written declaration, we might just issue the check to you. So this is the way we are pumping money. Now, having said so, DST, IDEX, they're running those Shark Tank type of, they keep coming up with those contests. It's not particular on drones per se, but they are all in this. What is drones? Ultimately, it's all electronics, telecommunication, material science, aeronautics, etc. So they keep running those challenges. It may not be called drones, but it will definitely fit into one of those new age kind of things. So that is what we should focus on. Having said so, we will keep trying for the Disha fund, because that will be a hardcore drone fund, wherein we'll pay money for R&D, not for sales, because sales will happen only. And that's why our focus was all on production. Get the equipment, get the know-how from somewhere, and use the foreign machines, and then churn out, do the screwdriver technology, assemble, produce, sell, and claim money from the government. So that's the crawl part, the crawl walk. And then the walk and the run will be when we start pumping money into R&D at the IITs, or even IITs is again easy, because you're giving it to a government institution. What I think, Amit, you were asking was about giving an entrepreneur who nobody knows, a greenhorn, so-called greenhorn, with the wackiest ideas. That will take some time, maybe a year, maybe 2. I'm hopeful, but I don't have a clear answer right now. Amit?
No, that's a great answer. It's a starting point, at least. Thank you. Syed, over to you. So why don't you give us a VC-funded company perspective on the same, right? What challenges, how do you prioritize what you work on versus the market returns and those kind of things?
Thank you. I think is one of the driving forces behind the fairly high level of hypes that you see about this industry in US and partly in Europe is partly to do with the pressures from the investors. So when some of the entrepreneurs who are technically savvy and knowledgeable, when they're faced with an investor who says, I want return on my investment within 3 to maximum 5 years, and we are talking about a technology that takes 7 years to develop it and another 5 years to take it to the market, then he's somehow forced to come up with certain numbers that makes the investors happy. And that's why you see in some of the forecasts of the leading companies in this area, both in US and Europe, that they come up with certain numbers that are almost unimaginable. As an example, we have one of these players, they say they want to produce 2,000 aircraft by 2028, 2,000 of 4-seater VTOL aircraft by 2028, where the entire world market size for general aviation now is 2,400 aircraft. So, and that is really because of the pressure from the investors, and appreciating that this is a long-term technology development is very important. And the hurdles like certification, not having a clear path for the larger vehicles, how the certification of the vehicle will be done, and that means time. That means we need patience. And here, governments could come and help the investors to alleviate the risk from the investors, and I'm talking about across the world, not just in UK or US. If the governments want to see an industry growing, depending on what part of the industry they want to see grow, they can come and chip in their help. So within the advanced air mobility industry, there are various chunks within the market. So on the total, if you say that 100% of the market, probably on the OEM side, about 15 to 20% is the revenue going to the OEMs. About 15 to 20% are going to the operators. About 15% are going to the infrastructure. Some people estimate to be up to 19%, and so on. So there are different segments within the market, depending on what governments see, a specific government, so in this case, for example, Indian government, would see the future of advanced air mobility and where they see strategically India could come in, then they can support that area. So the Indian government cannot say that I want to see manufacturers and young manufacturers, small companies to go into the sort of production stage without helping them on the manufacturing side. But if their view is that Indian as the Indian market would have better opportunity if it focuses on the operation, then it's better to go and support somehow on the operational side. And therefore, so depending on the target that they want to see in future. But certainly, if we don't want to fall behind this new pioneering era, it's important for each government in the world to come and support their startups, and also in collaboration. Sometimes we could collaborate with certain companies in India, and the joint collaboration could also benefit different sites. So it doesn't have to be done solo. The other aspect is that there are a lot of supports that could be provided for the young companies that are not actually financials. Sometimes non-financial supports are as important and as valuable as the financial ones. Thank you.
So thank you, Syed. So I'll segue off of, you touched on the word infrastructure. You gave the percentages for different aspects of where the money goes. So going to the infrastructure side, this question is for Mr. Naidu. So we talked about the infrastructure requirement and energy requirements as we talk about not just advanced air mobility, but these drones and bigger drones. They all will require, and I know Mr. Dubey touched on surge charging in the sky. Now, to get there, like if we talk about, if all of a sudden we look at these flying cars all around, and you have the need for these vertiports, which is airports of the future. So it's not the traditional, it doesn't have to be a fancy thing, it can be a driveway. The key is the infrastructure needs to support power. And based on the research that, and the OEMs that we work with and stuff we know, it's like OEMs are designing batteries that are up to like 500 watt hours per kilogram. And these new lithium batteries will obviously be charging after each flight. But with the nation's power grid kind of maxed out in different countries at different levels, and I know Reggie talked about solar, and I think it was Reggie or someone else talked about the solar and wind power coming on. They'll at least need to be, depending on where these locations are, even if it's high up in the mountains in the Northeast, we'll probably need a new electrical power substation with the cost. Like I don't know exact cost in rupees, but in other parts of the world, it costs around $1 million per mile to bring power. It has to be located somewhere near where this vertiport is. So what do you see the challenges from an infrastructure requirement point of view? How do you think, because we can have all the best technology, but if the infrastructure is not there to charge the aircraft, how are you going to use it, especially if it's eVTOL? So how do you think we can solve that problem? Hello? Did we lose you? Dr. Naidu, you're on mute.
Yes, yeah, okay, yeah. So yes, it's a good point. Even in the beginning of, if you see the electric vehicle, especially for the bigger vehicle like electric buses, so the battery, almost covers the almost 50%, even 40% of the weight. So we want to reduce, and also the and different battery technologies. Even Hitachi Energy as a vendor, we have done extraordinary work in terms of the battery charging, especially for the commercial vehicles, trucks, buses, etc. For example, we have a technology we have done for the flash charging. So that means that even the bus can charge in 15 seconds when the passengers will boarding on time itself. Just in a 15 seconds, it's a bigger bus, almost 600 kilowatt hour energy it will consume in just 15 seconds. I think such kind of even further advanced, like even wireless charging, is really needed for this to really want to deploy these UAM vehicles. That's the one technology I am seeing. Yes, you are right. Today, the battery capacity per kilowatt or even density is less. Even further, there is a much research is needed to really get the efficient batteries, especially for the weight to the capacity ratio should be minimized. So that is the key. I think research is really needed in this domain. So these are the 2 points I want to bring your notice. But it's not really a big hurdle. We already solved such certain problems, especially in the commercial vehicles.
Awesome. Thank you. I'll segue to Raj. I know I haven't come back to you in a while. So Raj, a question for you. And Bindeshwari and Reggie, please let me know if we are running out of time. I know we are like 7 minutes over. If we need to wrap up, just let me know. Raj, a question for you. You come from an IoT world, right? Tying all these autonomous things together and IoTs of the world. At the end of the day, there'll be a lot of data, right? So an unprecedented amount of data will be connected. Airspace autonomy can collect, manage, and learn from it. How can this best inform the community given that airspace is a public asset and not a competitive business enterprise? Because airspace is state-owned, it's not privately owned. So how do you, all this data that gets captured, do you have any thoughts? Raj, did we lose you?
I think so, Amit, he's dropped off.
Oh, he's dropped off. Okay. Would someone else like to take that question? Okay. Anyone?
Okay, I think Amit.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I think the UTM policy, which was released by the Indian government last year, it does talk about monetizing of the lower airspace of the country in some manner, because see, all these stakeholders who are going to put in money in the infrastructure, in managing the operations, in the supporting data service provision, they are going to look for their return on investment. So somewhere it has to come. Yes, you are saying, what you are saying is correct. The national airspace belongs to the Airports Authority of India, that through them to the Ministry of Civil Aviation. And even today, manned aircraft which are crossing the national airspace, even if they don't use any airport in India, they do pay certain charges to the Airport Authority of India, because a similar model can be thought of once all the stakeholders sit across a table and start thinking on these lines for the lower airspace also. Because those investors in all those vertiports, in all those verti-hubs, in all those data network and transmission systems are going to require some return on their investment. So and people will be paying for services, because if you're a UTM service provider and if you start first moving cargo and then moving passengers through the city, you are getting paid for it, and you will be paying for the services that are being provided to you by the UTM service provider or the supplementary data service provider. So there is going to be a whole new sector of economy which is going to open up because of this. And right from the beginning, we have to make plans of how to do this. That is what I think.
Awesome. Thank
Sorry,
you.
Amit, I couldn't hear you. Yeah.
Amit, thank you very much to all. I need to leave for another session. So indeed, it's been wonderful, and we will have more frequent interaction on this topic to take it forward, not as a once in a year conference thing, but we'll be meeting all of you. Thank you very much, and special thanks to Amit, Ajit, and Amber Dubey for making it a very interesting discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you all. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Amit, especially because you are in the middle of your night. So you can go back and get your break now.
Just summarize, if you have like 10-15 seconds, I'll summarize the notes I took during
Go ahead, Mr. Ganju.
Please go ahead. Yeah.
Say it again. Oh, I think we wrapped. So anyway, I'll send you some thoughts that I captured during the meeting offline, and feel free to connect with each other or me if I can help in any way. Thank you for taking the time, and everyone have a great day, morning, afternoon, evening. Talk to you all later. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Thank you all.